Okay, Denver Broncos draft here, and they had some very fascinating picks we will have to talk about in this draft class. So first, let's just get into, let me explain what the chart you see next to me is. The first number you're going to see is where the player was selected, then you see the player name, their position, and finally where they were projected to be selected. And you see right off the bat, pick number 20 was a really strong pick. Jody Barron here. A lot of people thought they might go Omarion Hampton, but they decided to improve the defense, which it's weird how much resources they put this offseason into improving their defense, which was already great last year, and they lost some pieces. You have to replace guys, of course, but it's still pretty interesting that this is clearly the way they want to, operate their team, have a great defense, and they trust that they can, Sean Payton and Bo Nix and the good offensive line can figure out the offense, which that's a good chunk of the offense, right? But you have Barron, who I think should just be a great outside corner for them. I like him as an outside corner. Some people will say that he should be more of a guy who plays all over the place, but I think outside corner tends to be the most valuable spot there, and I think that they'll probably at least try him there. And hey, if he needs to play a different role to make it work, you can do that as well. But if he does hit, and you have two great boundary corners, one of which is a defensive player of the year in Pat Surtain, who's the reigning defensive player of the year, I'd say that's pretty good. I'd say that's a pretty good, corner duo there. And they have some other good defenders, of course, in the secondary as well. So that's a great pick. Slam dunk. Huge fan. We then have some questionable ones, right? So again, the consensus big board is not the end all be all, right? Of course, there are always going to be players who are, projected to go 1/10 and play way better than that. However, just the reality of the situation is if you draft enough players that are projected to go, or, the average player that's projected to go 1/10 that gets selected at pick 60 plays like a player who was projected to go 1/10. There are exceptions, but you're chasing exceptions usually in this scenario. But let's talk about RJ Harvey, a running back out of UCF who there are people who absolutely love this player and are in agreement with the Denver Broncos that he is worth pick 60. I'm probably more in the 110, feels more accurate for me camp. Because his speed is for real. He is a bit of an older prospect at 24 years old. Also a bit of a smaller prospect, just 5'9", listed at 208. Speed is for real though. Speed is great. The speed is awesome, and he was able to run by guys consistently in college. That was kind of the main thing he did in college. I think the question you have to ask is, will it still be as for real once you get to the next level and you have linebackers who can run that fast, right? That's just going to be the question, but we'll see. I think he should at the very least be a contributor, though. How valuable will he be? Well, we can decide that, but I think he'll be a contributor for sure. Also, not much of a blocker here, RJ Harvey. You're going to need someone else to come play third downs. He's going to be the first and second down guy, is how I would assume what will happen there. They then go with Pat Bryant, another guy who was projected to go, 90 picks later. So they are clearly on their own board. They are not looking at the consensus big board as they should be. They put a lot of money into making their board, but still, it's a little surprising here. Pat Bryant, a player who, there's some really good traits with him. And I think for a guy who is projected to go 162nd, that feels not quite as fair because he can make some really tough catches. He does have, he is a good route runner. And I mean, for the traits, he's a 6'3" guy. So you like all that stuff. The issue is just, does he have the explosiveness to fully work at the next level? I just don't know if he does. And so, he'll certainly be a contributor, but to me, he seems more like a depth guy on paper. But again, Sean Payton clearly knows a lot more about receivers than I do. So if he feels like he can coach this guy up, maybe that's why they decided to grab him. They then drafted Savion Jones here, who is a 280-pound interior defensive lineman who also is 6'6". So a bit of a skinnier guy for that position. Weird to call someone who's 280 skinny, but for that position, yes, you're a bit skinnier there. But ultimately feels like someone who could be a very good pass rusher on the inside. That's what they're hoping they get here. So kind of a fine pick at pick 101, getting someone who should at least be able to come in and play some snaps and be effective there. They then drafted K. Robinson here, short for Quandarius Robinson, who is a very unique player. So he's had 300 snaps in college. Those were all at Alabama, 246 snaps last year. So that's a really low amount of snaps, right? For for a player. So that's interesting. Listed at just 241, so definitely on the skinnier side for an edge rusher. So they're going a little light here. But again, a guy who did have very good pass rush metrics when he was able to work at Alabama. And I think the logic here is at pick 134, could we potentially get a steal here? It is just someone who just couldn't get playing time at Alabama because that's a hard school to get playing time at, but is actually a good player. And once we get him into NFL and develop him, he could continue to become a good player. When do you want to draft a player like that? Well, that's certainly up for debate, but ultimately, it's an interesting pick and one that I kind of am fascinated to see how it works out. So yeah, definitely, I would say I'm a fan of this selection. And then they went special teams with their last two picks. So first getting a punter with pick 216, which, hey, people will disagree and agree on what the value is of a punter. But you know what? I mean, teams do draft special teams guys at this point. And it's one of those things where if you draft a receiver who's going to play special teams at this point, then people can say, well, maybe they're going to be a receiver as well. They could do multiple things, but they're a special teams guy, right? And in fact, like Caleb Lohner here, I mean, he's straight up a special teams guy. That's what he was doing in college, was being a special teams guy. I have to imagine that's what he's going to do in the NFL, is be a special teams guy. So getting a couple guys strictly to play special teams. Again, if you're going to draft a special teams guy, I guess punter's not the worst way to go there. We can talk about how valuable that is, but the odds of getting someone who's going to be more than that in this spot isn't too great either. So maybe just get someone who can help out the special teams. It's not the worst idea in the world. You do have to put some resources into that stuff, right? So yeah, ultimately a weird draft. And again, you do see their last pick not on the consensus big board, which kind of makes sense. So yeah, as a whole, I mean, literally every single selection outside of their first round pick was considered a reach via the consensus big board. A lot of these were considered pretty major reaches. So that's that's a potential issue, right? But again, I'm sure they will tell you, like, listen, we're getting guys who can do specific things, and because of that, they're maybe not going to work for every single team, but they could work for the Denver Broncos. So ultimately, I love their first round pick, and we'll see how the rest of this all shakes out. But those are my thoughts on the Broncos draft. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.